Again, I'd like to thank everyone at OIS and especially the organizing committee for having us back. This is probably our 5th or 6th meeting we've been at. We always appreciate the platform and the opportunity to get the word out. What we're going to talk about today is update everybody on our DME programs. We're getting close to phase 3s at this point, which we'll show very shortly. Our Illuminate programs have gone through 2 phase 2 studies, which we'll show now. So many of the audience here is very aware of DME. DME is an ischemic vascular disease with multiple pathways that converge on destabilizing the retina. When you take a step back and look at DME in its entirety, rather than just fluid or blood or whatever the case might be, really it's oxidative stress that's driving 4 pathways in general towards retinal destabilization. These are inflammation, increased Ang2, apoptosis and neurodegeneration, and of course increased VEGF. Everyone here is very familiar with VEGF and anti-VEGF inhibitors, but these only target one pathway. They do work very well, obviously, and they're the major standard of care right now, but as others have said today as well, and as the ECHO study and the early studies have noted, somewhere around 40 to 50% of the population is inadequately treated with just going after VEGF. What's interesting about Luminate is that you have the ability to work much farther upstream at the cell cycle level, where you can push the cell out of hypoxic response mode and go after all 4 pathways at the same time. If the cell doesn't have a hypoxic response, it's not producing inflammation, it's not producing Ang2 or VEGF, and you basically can turn off the apoptosis cascade very far upstream. The anticipation is if you can treat multiple pathways simultaneously, you have the ability to treat patients that are not well treated now. This drug is very unique. It's a small synthetic peptide. It's less than 1 kilodalton, and it preferentially accumulates in the RPE when injected in the vitreous, only under hypoxic stress, under oxidative stress. If you don't have hypoxic stress, the drug does not interact with the retina. It is resident in the retina for several months. Up to this point, we've already treated about 430 patients, mostly in the US, across phase 1 and phase 2 studies, mostly in DME, but also some other indications, and the drug is exquisitely well tolerated. Last year, we announced our DELMAR Stage 1 study. This was a phase 2 study in DME that showed, first of all, the drug was very safe. Second of all, 1 milligram was the best dose. Third of all, the drug lasted 12 weeks in monotherapy, and we met our primary and secondary endpoints, the most important, of course, being visual acuity compared to anti-VEGF. Today, what I want to update everyone on is stage 2 of the DELMAR study. This was an additional 80 patients. This study completed and read out about 60 days ago. And what we wanted to do here is look to see if we can refine this more. If Luminate performed well by itself, what happens if can you have your cake and eat it too? Can you in some way marry the benefits of anti-VEGF and Luminate together? So what we did, as you can see here, is the main 3 arms of the study are monthly Avastin versus sequential therapy, which is the second row. That's a little bit of anti-VEGF to clean out the VEGF that's already in the eye, Luminate to turn off the production of more and inflammation and Ang2 and so on, and then go 12 weeks without any further treatment. And no rescues were done in this study, even though it was available. And the third row is to do direct combination and then wait 12 weeks to read out. What did we find? If you follow the 2 top bars, the blue and the red bars, what you see is looking at the primary endpoint of best-corrected visual acuity. Basically, you meet your primary endpoint. You're non-inferior in visual acuity, not only at 20 weeks, which is the far right yellow box, but you're non-inferior at every time point. Not only are you non-inferior at every time point, but at the primary endpoint at 20 weeks, you're going 12 weeks in all patients without any further treatment. What you will see also is direct combination. Putting the drugs together in more or less at the same time does not work well. If you take a deeper dive into the data, it gets actually more interesting as well. So if Avastin and Luminate worked about the same in terms of vision, and ours lasts much longer, look at the far left bars. There's your 6.7 and 7.1 letters of visual acuity improvement. So the drugs go toe-to-toe, and visual acuity, they're about the same, last much longer, totally different mechanisms. Look at the yellow boxes. What that shows you is when you actually look at where the improvements come from. It's quite fascinating. In the Avastin patients, most of the improvements are coming from the treatment-naive patients. In the Luminate patients, whether you look at the 20-week endpoint or the best visual acuity you can get, most of the improvements in Luminate are coming in the patients who've had lots of chronic anti-VEGF. On average, the patients who've had poor response to anti-VEGF had about 13 to 14 anti-VEGF injections before they came in. If you take a little bit deeper dive and you look at the Delmar Stage 1 from last year and the Delmar Stage 2, the new data today, and you have 74 patients between the 1 milligram Luminate arms of those two studies and the Avastin, you see the same trend. Avastin really shines in treatment-naive. Luminate does better in patients where VEGF is not the main component. Looking at the distribution of the improvements as well. The left side is treatment-naive. The right side is patients who've had chronic anti-VEGF. What you see is in treatment-naive, when you look at 10-letter gainers, 5-letter gainers, or no improvements, they're fairly similar. When you look at the patients who have poor prior anti-VEGF response, you can see that you can double the 10-letter gainers, you can double the 5-letter gainers, and you can cut by 75% the number of patients who don't respond at all anymore. Going forward, if you can go after multiple mechanisms in oxidative stress at the same time, inflammation, increased Ang2, apoptosis, and increased VEGF production, you have the ability to restabilize the retina, reestablish the tight junctions in the RPE, and make the clinical improvements that we all care about. Going forward, again, looking at the various studies out there, like the early study and so on, roughly 40 to 50% of the DME population is very well treated with anti-VEGF. It's the other 50% of the patients where a new mechanism of action, such as ours with Luminate, comes into play. We don't think anti-VEGF is ever going to go away. It's going to become cheaper and more crowded, but again, you have half the population roughly that needs something else. Two last things. What kind of patients are appropriate for Luminate therapy? Anybody who's doing less than adequately on anti-VEGF. That means non-responders, plateaued patients, even responders if you can't get them back to functional vision. And last but not least, we're anticipating our phase 3s for probably third quarter or fourth quarter of next year, 2018. In the meantime, we anticipate end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA in first quarter of 2018, right around the corner. We're looking at both M&A and the public markets in parallel paths. Thank you.